COVID-19 restrictions by this Friday, May 28th. And he's going to end the statewide mask requirement by July 1st. The governor's process has 3 steps. The first step took place on Friday, May 7th. And that removed the limits for outdoor dining and ended the mask requirement when you're outside, unless, of course, you're in a very large crowd with more than 500 people at any event. Step 2 is set to happen this Friday on the 28th. And that will see an end to all capacity and distancing limits, including indoors. So people will need to wear face covering indoors and at large events outdoors with more than 500 people. I want to remind people that Minneapolis does still have a mask requirement. So then again, anybody over the age of 2 and anybody who is able to medically tolerate a face covering still needs to cover their nose and mouth with a mask or face covering when they're in indoor spaces and public accommodations for the city of Minneapolis. And I also believe St. Paul has that too. So again, the Twin Cities twin in there. And this includes spaces like grocery stores, restaurants, coffee shops, cafes, religious gathering spaces, community centers. I'm excited to see those opening back up, shopping centers, malls. And then Mayor Fry is in close contact with the Minneapolis Health Department, and he'll continue weighing those different public health data and determining when the city will lift those restrictions as well. And also that the governor's peacetime emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic is also still in effect. He's extended that a few times. But one of the main things that I wanted to be sure that people are aware of is that the state still has the eviction moratorium in place. So with this executive order, it helps people remain sheltered during this peacetime emergency. It doesn't relieve you from the obligation of paying rent. So you need to still pay the rent that you can, but there are safety measurements in place. And then the state still does offer emergency rental assistance and utility assistance. So you're able to call 211 to check on any information that can help you get through that emergency.
Wonderful.
And then today, we're talking about mental health on Minneapolis 360. And here to join us is Brandon Jones from the Minnesota Association of Children's Mental Health to talk with us about mental health, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Awesome.
Brandon, are you with us?
I am. Greetings, everybody.
Hey, Brandon.
Thank you for joining us today. Are you able to, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. I'm Brandon Jones. I'm the newly appointed Executive Director of Minnesota Association of Children's Mental Health. Most people know me for the trauma work that I've done throughout the state of Minnesota. I focus on adverse childhood experiences, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, and justice. And I've done a lot of work around community violence. I've done a lot of work working with families and young people throughout the Twin Cities. My educational background, I have a bachelor's in sociology from the University of Minnesota. I have a master's in community psychology from Metro State University, and I have another master's in marriage and family therapy from Adler Graduate School. I'm also a 2013 Bush Foundation Leadership Fellow, and with that work, I focus specifically on developing social emotional intelligence skills amongst African American adolescents. And I am a Twin Cities born and raised person. I'm from St. Paul. I grew up in a household full of trauma and drama, and I turned that pain into my passion and helping other people alleviate that so we have a better state, emotionally, mentally, and physically. So that's me.
I love it.
Beautiful. That's heart work. Heart from the heart. That's heart work. Can you help us understand what is mental health?
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that we understand that there's a difference between mental health and emotional wellness. Mental health includes our emotional, physiological, and psychological state of well-being, and it can affect the way that we think and the way that we feel and the way that we act. Now, some people don't have mental illness, though. Mental illness is when you clinically get diagnosed by meeting criteria in this big fancy book we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. But many people, unfortunately, have emotional wellness issues. I think there's no other week to highlight this than this week, as we, as yesterday was the anniversary of George Floyd's killing. That was one event of many that has rocked not only the city of Minneapolis, but just the state and the world, really. And many people have been feeling emotional wellness concerns due to that. There are people who had to take the day off from work yesterday. There are people who had to take social media breaks. And that's just to make sure we're taking care of our emotional well-being. And that's important. It doesn't mean you have a mental illness, but it is also important to take care of your mental state in those aspects as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Definitely. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Why do you think having a month dedicated to increasing awareness around mental health is important?
That's a great question. Well, because for so long we've been conditioned not to talk about how we feel. You're supposed to suck it up, stop crying, don't whine, toughen up. If you're talking about a male person, man up, and don't deal with how you feel. We ain't got time for those tears, right? And that doesn't do us well. Because what ends up happening is a lot of people suffer in silence. And then it turns into other ways of coping and dealing with it. Overcompensating on alcohol or food, not getting enough sleep, being aggressive or violent, or just completely isolating. So by having a month dedicated to highlighting mental health and the things that show up for people, it gives not just awareness, but it gives an acceptance that if you are someone who's struggling, it's okay because you are not alone. And we have to make sure that we continue to carry that message and support folks when they're struggling and not shame them, not blame them and harm them, but definitely give them the support, love, and help that they deserve.
Definitely. Why do you think some people in some communities, why is it so difficult to talk about mental health?
I think the main thing, a lot of times you hear people say stigma, and I say that's too easy of an answer. Because there's a lot to unpack with quote-unquote stigma. Most people aren't scared of mental health. They just don't know how to deal with it. It hasn't been something that has been socially acceptable to deal with. Plus, we lack a lot of information about it. Where I come from the Twin Cities. When somebody was having a mental health crisis, we were told, leave that person alone, something wrong with them. Or that person's just quote-unquote crazy. We weren't told, that person has schizophrenia. We weren't told that person's dealing with bipolar disorder, or that person has generalized anxiety disorder. There's not a common language or understanding around mental health. So that's one thing that makes it difficult. Another thing that makes it difficult is there's not enough providers that represent the various backgrounds that we have, whether that's ethnicity, gender expression, sexual orientation. We need more professionals that have variety of backgrounds to lend support to the folks who need the help the most. And when you go to someone and you're getting ready to tell them your deepest, darkest secrets, it is very calming if they have an inkling of understanding of who you are and what you've been through. That does actually help. And then we have to be honest. Mental health costs money, right? It's not cheap. So there's a financial factor for many people as well. It's like, well, I got to pay these bills. We talked about, utilities and rent before I got started talking. Some people are making a choice. Do I go to a therapist this month, or do I make sure that my utility bill is paid up? So there are ways to get, the mental health treatment covered for free, but a lot of people don't know that. And if we don't know, we won't act on it. So sometimes people are making this difficult decision to just, suck it up and deal with their emotional turmoil without necessarily getting the help they need because they're weighing, is this going to cost me time, energy, and money?
Right. Especially time. A lot of us try to blow off, it's not that big of a deal. And then it just starts being compounded. So knowing it's difficult for some people to talk about mental health, what would you suggest we can do to reduce that stigma?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we can do is find ways to talk about it where it takes the shame out of it. There's a lot of stress around dealing with mental health. But I feel in community what happens is we blame people themselves for what they're dealing with. We have to understand that many of the mental health issues that people have comes from the environment and the situations that they experience. It's not just them. It's dealing with the consistent noise in your environment, or the yelling or the arguing, or the teasing and the bullying, or the lack of having material things and getting teased for it. So mental health for a person, they have to deal with the challenges of that, but it's a social concern. So one of the things that we can do is we have to find healthy ways of communicating that it's okay if you are struggling with the mental illness. Through podcasts, through shows like this here on KMOJ, through commercials, through books, through arts. These are the things that we have to utilize to continue to destigmatize, quote unquote, mental illness and let people know that it ain't all good and we can be okay.
Yeah, I definitely love seeing more people talk more about taking a mental health day,
Mm-hmm.
you know, modeling that behavior to each other, checking each other.
Absolutely.
So having a better understanding of mental health is important in order to help our loved ones and ourselves. What are things that people can do to improve their own mental health and support themselves in difficult times?
I think one of the first things that we can do is acknowledge that something has happened or is happening to you. And then once you're able to accept that, then the other things that you can do help, like taking a break, paying attention to your surroundings. Sometimes you need to disconnect from other people. You need to set a firm boundary. Sometimes those other people are family members, which can make it very hard. But for your well-being, maybe you need to take a break from dealing with them, or you need to relate to them differently, or you need to take a break from work. We talked about taking one of those well-being days and just taking a day off to decompress from all the stress that is going on there. Practicing self-care. And when I say self-care, I talk about self-care being proactive with our self-care. You know, when many people have been taught self-care in a very reactionary way, we wait for something to happen, then we take care of ourselves. Well, many of us know that some of the relationships we have or the job or school is already difficult. So why not take some steps first to lessen some of the difficulty for yourself? So be proactive with your self-care. Find spaces of gratitude, connect with nature. I know that is very hard for many people in urban environments because we have our creature comforts where going out in nature is a difficult thing. But, hey, the weather is getting warmer. Go explore Minnesota. You'll be surprised how calming some of these mountains and trees and these bodies of waters that we have are for you. Breathing. You know, one of the things that, unfortunately, we don't do enough of is realize that breathing is a way of calming ourselves. One of the things I often talk about is sighing. We always think of sighing like something our grandma used to do when we got on her nerves. It's like, oh, here we go. But sighing is actually a way for your body to physically relax itself. So sigh. Let those deep breaths in and out. Purposely sigh. Don't think of it as a sign of respect. Think of disrespect. Think of it as a way of calming your body and literally calming your nerves, because that's what sighing is. So breathing exercises are great. If you don't know where to start, there are tons of free apps. You can go on YouTube. There's tons of videos on breathing exercises. And then find community support. One of the beautiful things that I seen yesterday in so many pockets of the Twin Cities was community coming together and having joy in the midst of the anniversary of one of the most heinous things that we have experienced in quite some time. And people got together. They were singing. They were dancing. They were smiling. We need more of that. That's how we heal. Seek that support, but you have to take action. If you are waiting for someone else to bring healing into your life, it ain't going to come. It is up to you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's beautiful. Like, one of the things that I've always struggled with is being able to allow myself those happy moments during those times of pain and discomfort. Like, you almost feel like you're not supposed to, you're not allowed to, you're supposed to be sad, you're supposed to be angry. So I love that. Right. Thank you for bringing that up.
And you deserve it. You deserve it.
Yeah, we do. We do. That's how we heal. We deserve it. What about ways and resources to help a family member or friend? Those that are in our life that need support, how do we help them?
There are so many assets that we have in community that we don't always think of to help us. Whether it's our children that are struggling, a neighbor, or even ourselves. Connect with school social workers or a family doctor. Go to North Point Health and Wellness Center. It's right there. There are tons of people that can help you. There are folks in the community that can help. There's other clinics right there. Really, the biggest thing we can do is just speak up and don't be scared of it. Call a clinic. There's so many different numbers out there that you can actually call and just say, hey, there's a crisis line. You can text MN to 741741. Again, that's 741741. And that's a crisis line. So if someone's actively going through something, they may be manic or they may be out of control. You can get help right there. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're having thoughts where you don't want to be on earth anymore. You want to harm yourself. That is an opportunity for you to connect directly to somebody to help you move forward. We have, in Minneapolis, there's a COPE line as well. So there are assets and resources out there, but really the biggest thing to do is to take that step for yourself moving forward. Trying to think of a few other things to kind of offer out to people. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a big one. And a lot of times people don't realize they're suicidal until they get to that point. Mm-hmm. But if you have any inkling that you are done with life or that you are just fed up, you're tired, you don't want to move forward, you need to connect with somebody that you trust. And if there is no one else that you trust, definitely call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-723-TALK. And TALK is 8255. So again, 1-800-723-8255. Don't go at mental illness, mental health, or even just thoughts of suicide or suicidal ideation alone. Make sure that you connect with people, even if it's someone you don't trust very well, to get the help that you need.
Mm-hmm. So if someone expresses suicidal ideations to us, we can give them that number. Can we help them call that number?
Absolutely. You can definitely call that number. And honestly, that's how most people get to that number, is someone else calls on their behalf. But it's important for you to make that connection with the person to ensure that they maintain safety while that phone call is being made. And that puts you in kind of an uncomfortable situation. But if it's to save a life, I think that is necessary. So sometimes we have to be brave enough to just step in and assist someone else who is ready to cause harm to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Many of our communities face the structural, the environmental, and societal factors that challenge our mental health. Can you elaborate on these challenges?
Absolutely. So a lot of these challenges come from historical trauma and intergenerational trauma. So historical trauma is when a group of people go through a traumatic event: slavery, the Holocaust, 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, the tornado that hit Minneapolis a few years ago. That's a historical trauma point. It disrupts a community, disrupts a group of people. And then the residual effects of that is what we call intergenerational trauma. There are houses still in North Minneapolis that have not recovered from the tornado. There are lots of lands from the tornado knocking down homes and buildings that haven't been redeveloped. That is an intergenerational trauma that affects the folks who live there, that affects their mood, that affects all types of things. There are many memorials throughout the streets of folks who've lost their lives due to community violence, with teddy bears and balloons and signs and messages. That affects people's mental health. That is an intergenerational trauma because it affects not just the parent or the caregivers who lost the person, but also the other children and people who live in that community. It is important to understand how trauma shows up in our lives and affects us day to day. And these things can be systematic, and they are definitely communal. And those are the challenges that affect our mental health that we have to pay attention to, because guess what? It starts to affect the other disparities in our lives. Talk about low income, talk about poverty, domestic violence, talk about incarceration. All these things are interconnected through trauma. And if we're not going to take a look at that and start to chip away at that and do our parts, we're going to unfortunately have more mental health challenges, but we don't have to. We don't have to live in struggle. At one point in time in the African-American community, we called our culture the struggle. At some point, we need to call our culture the thrive and be able to evolve and move forward.
Ooh, I love that saying.
Yep. Can I get one more question before our time is up? And I think this is a great question to end on, is how are we able to foster the hope and the resilience in our communities?
I believe one of the steps happened yesterday. Actually, let me correct myself. One of the steps happened a year ago, where a community, amongst the unrest, stepped up, made sure babies had diapers, made sure grandparents had medications, made sure school students had things that they needed for the summer. People had meals to feed their bellies. That is where we start to have the healing in our community. Mental health therapy is just one piece to the puzzle. And let me tell you, as somebody who does this work all day, every day, that mental health therapy ain't going to solve all our problems. It's going to be community healing together. It's a united, independent effort. Everybody has to do their part. But when community comes together, that's when we heal. And that means we're going to have to take some uncomfortable steps and tell some uncomfortable truths for us to get better. But we have to stand together. Differences in opinion are fine. But if the goal is to make sure that we have healing and that our babies have an opportunity to grow and develop in a healthy community, that's all we need to unify around. And that's what community and systematic change looks like, is the people coming together with a central focus or a few focuses and being very diligent about making change happen. Therapists will step up and provide the healing, but we need help because there ain't enough of us to do it. We need help from folks in the community to actively engage in their healing process and use their gifts and talents to help and galvanize. And I would hope that we galvanize around children because they need it more than anybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. Brandon Jones, I want to thank you for joining us today on Minneapolis 360. I appreciate your time. I wish we had more time to talk about this important subject. It's just such a wealth of information to share. We have a lot to learn, and we have hope in moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Yes, Brandon. Maybe we can get you back to go a little bit more further in detail because it is very important in our community.
Anytime. Just let me know.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. All right.
Thank you, Glam Life Kim. I enjoyed this experience, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Oh, my God. You did an amazing job. I'm sure Anthony will be very proud. And we appreciate you in Minneapolis 360 for bringing this great information to our community, because it is important that we are aware of our mental health, because we have dealt with so much trauma, whether, like you said, it was life experiences and the environment that we grew up in, and then just over the years, and our children are having to deal with it now. And I just want to real quick, before we wrap this up, if you just want to let them know too, for if there are children out there who, could use some assistance or need a resource, that they're maybe dealing with some mental illness or just need some, to focus on their mental health, what are some websites that they can go to? You still there, Christine?
Oh, I thought you were asking. Brandon. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I got it right here in front of me. The Minnesota Association of Children's Mental Health, MACMH.org. Again, you guys, that's MACMH.org. Otherwise, you can find information at N as in November, C as in Charlie, T as in Tango, S as in Sierra, N as in November.org. And I'll make sure that we have this information available at KMOJ in case you guys missed it and you need to get some more information. But please, 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 community, let's get help. Let's make sure that we stay aware of our mental health, because it is important and it does affect all of us in some form or fashion. Christine, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Same here, darling.
All right.
Have a good one. All right, Twin Cities. Up next, right now, Mr. Zany K, Mr. Loudmouth himself. He's going to take you guys to the next level.